Imagine this. You are one of many workers in a factory where you work around 60 hours a week and barely get $10. You are forced to pay for any and all materials you use, including the chair you sit on, and the noise is almost deafening. It is uncomfortable and unsafe, but you continue to work there because you desperately need money. Welcome to the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory.
It was called the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, just because it's just like it sounds. It was the waist of the shirts, and it was in the design of a triangle. So that's how it got the name.
Factory owners targeted immigrant women to work for them because they would work more hours for less money. The workers lived in tiny apartments and sometimes with many other families.
The girls were newly arrived immigrants, so they didn't speak English. They were very easy to take advantage of. They would have multiple families that were living in dilapidated buildings. The buildings were not up to code.
The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory was located on the top 3 floors of the 10-story Ash Building. Although the building was known as an architectural wonder, it had many problems due to the lack of safety precautions.
Even like the basic safety precautions that they could have in place weren't in place. They had 4 different elevators, but only one was operational, and all of the doors were locked because they wanted to make sure productivity was as high as possible. So they never wanted them to be away from their seat, away from their sewing machine.
Finally, the workers had enough of the unfair conditions. They rose together and protested for workers' rights. This was the ILGWU strike of 1909. Unfortunately, the protest had no positive outcome because of the factory owners' power.
When there was a strike, actually in 1909, 2 years before, the owners paid off the police to put the women in jail.
Then, on March 25th, 1911, at around 4:40 p.m., tragedy struck New York. 145 people were killed in a fire that started in a basket of scraps.
They either jumped to their death or they were caught in the on that 8th floor, or they were caught in the stairwell and they burned to death.
The outcome of the fire could have been different if it weren't for all the safety and workers' rights violations.
You saw the progressive era really start in the 1890s, and this is kind of like at the height of that, where people are starting to see the consequences to industrialization and urbanization, immigration, the fact that everything is growing so quickly, but they're not taking precautions into consideration.
After the fire, people came together and held a memorial for the Triangle Fire victims. The garment workers at the funeral marched around chanting, "We demand fire protection." The fire had a serious impact on the workers' rights movement. After the fire, there were several other strikes. Over time, workplaces began adding fire protection as well as giving workers fair pay and conditions.
There was a protest march the following month, and that really forced the hands of government to start to implement safety, not just safety precautions, but women started to get paid more. The hours went from 12 hours a day to 8 hours a day, those kinds of labor relations.
The conditions that people worked under back then were terrible. Thankfully, they are very different today.
I try to make flexible hours. I try to work around school schedules, try to give them more time off when they have finals, those kind of things. In other words, the goal is to try to set a goal that they want to achieve and then make my job fit it.
There are currently several laws in place stating these rights.
Well, most of the rights that the employees have are actually determined by federal, state employment laws. It'll tell you about minimum wage, how hours are counted.
We are all very lucky to live in a time when workers' rights matter. These rights are not only important, but necessary.
They are important. Otherwise, I think they would be taken advantage of. You just have what is considered a fair exchange. In other words, they give me a fair amount of work, and I give them a fair amount of pay. And as long as we can keep that even and make it profitable for everyone, that's when it's going to work out.
The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire is an event that went down in history. Even though it was a terrible thing, it did inspire workers' rights movements and helped pave the way for what we have today.